My name is Kelly Flynn, and I'm a rancher here in Broadwater County. And yes, I heard yesterday that the Great Tech pulled the offer. But I think it's important for the commissioners to get a feeling from the folks that are out in the country that are the farmers and ranchers in Broadwater County, and to see how that could potentially affect Broadwater County ranchers and farmers. Originally, when I talked to Gary Sullivan, he asked how we could improve this potential purchase. And I mentioned some things that were really important for ranchers and farmers in Broadwater County. And one thing that's very important are property tax values. And what happens is if the value that somebody has for a purchase of land becomes a very high value, it essentially affects every farmer and rancher in Broadwater County. And agriculture struggles as it is. And when they asked me, what do you think about the value? I explained some of the comps that were out there, and the comps were much lower than the comps that they were talking about valuing the land. They talked about values of purchasing this land for between $1,400 and $1,900 per acre. For grazing land in Broadwater County, those are not the values of that land. And so what happens is it effectively puts those costs eventually, because it can become a comp, on all the farmers and ranchers in Broadwater County. The second thing that we talked about is weed control in Broadwater County is a very important thing. And in my lifetime, when you live next to government agencies having land, even though we have a weed law in Montana that says if there is a private property owner next to you, that essentially you can go through the process and force them to pay for the weeds. That is not the case with government ground. And in my lifetime, and I think in the lifetime of many of the ranchers and farmers who have come in here, they would say the same thing. On the public ground in this county, they do not take care of the ground. And so that is some concern when you have a government agency take over the ground. You don't have the same force of law that you have when there is private property owner next to you. They talked about some other things that, is it going to be good for the public? And of course, I think those are not really germane to what we're talking about today. Our concern, and I hope I convey it to the commissioner, is if that had gone through, it stood the possibility of increasing the cost to every farmer and rancher in Broadwater County. So I would caution the commissioners on that. This was the only time that I saw a notice that this was on an agenda. And I think one of the other things that I was concerned about is hearing through the grapevine that potentially there were commissioners supporting this transaction without really having the feedback from those up in the agricultural community. And so it is my hope that the commissioners will take a very close view if things like this come forward and see how it will impact the people who in Broadwater County have made their livelihood here and are spending dollars in the community and want to stay on the land for time and time on again. So thank you for allowing me to come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Tim?
Tim Ravendall, as a citizen and a property owner, I am absolutely in agreement with Mr. Flynn that sometimes when we look at the recreational aspect, which I think is the foundation of the push for what we've seen not only going on across the lake now with this pending, but look at what we've seen in the Elkhorn Mountains. We have lost industry due to the same type of programming where the Wildlife Management Unit status created in the Elkhorn Mountains has removed all timber resource management, has drastically reduced grazing, which has caused fire issues. We've also lost mining opportunities, which are basic resource foundational industries that have supported this county and could continue to do so. So it's really important to make sure that we don't start throwing these places like that into what is known in the world that I live in as a de facto wilderness. Because once it becomes that, weed control is no longer taken care of. Access for fire, access for range management are lost. And we need to be careful that as we move forward to make sure that we don't lose that opportunity and the ability to manage the lands locally, because when it comes from the top down, we lose every time. And with that said, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Charlie?
One last thing, a lot of folks here have not stood up. With the commissioner's permission, I would like to ask if there's any people in this room who are standing up in support of that transaction, if that transaction were going through. And if they don't want to get up and talk, if they would at least give their name and say whether they opposed it or supported it.
Anyone here that supports it?
No,
Everybody opposed? Okay.
One follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You know, one of the advertisements that I've seen is the purchase of the property, if you will, has been really highly endorsed by Montana Wildlife Federation and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Now these two entities have kind of evolved into I guess you could say a real estate business where they're making money off of this. And one of the things we found, I spent over 10 years with multiple use association working to try and make sure that people had a seat at the table here in Broadwater County. And one of the things that we found was Montana Wildlife Federation spends about 50 weeks a year promoting things that impact private property. And the rest, the other 4 or 5 weeks of the year are spent to promote recreation and hunting and fishing and wildlife opportunities. And one of the things that we've seen here in Broadwater County is just exactly that. We need to make sure that we are aware of that and don't allow that to step out into the front of the bus, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Kelly?
For the record, I think it's only fitting that the people here may at least list their name and their representation if they opposed it.
I have a question, Kelly. Where do they get the comps? Because I've got the ad that I just gave to Carol where they're asking, what, 7 million for that place? What is it? 10 million. And yeah, there's a great big house there, but then there's, what, 5,000 acres? I can't read that. But, you know, I saw this growing up as a child way back east. I came from what you wouldn't think of as being rural if you, but northern New Jersey was rural. And there were people who had beautiful herds of sheep and cattle, prize cattle, you know, they were just gorgeous. You can look at the ground there and something grows. And my dad raised apples, and he fought very hard as the unpaid mayor in our township to not get people taxed out. But you could see all of these gorgeous farms being sold because of people in other areas because they couldn't afford the taxes. And so they just gave up and sold, and, you know, the developers came in. We had very tight minimum zoning and, you know, where I live, but it's sad to see that happen, and just because somebody can't afford to pay the taxes. And that's what always bothers me with these comps. You know, what do we do to try to protect your ranchers too?
If the question to the commissioners, I think the question is to me, Can I answer the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I don't understand it.
I think we do have private property rights, and people do have the right to do what they want with that property. I think we have to be careful on who has the deepest pockets, and sometimes it's an artificial deep pocket. And what has happened with that program is there is a very large deep pocket. When this transaction, which started to come up the year before, when they asked me about it, at first, the landowner was going to only keep a small piece of property with the large house. And I told them that if it was going to be better for the public, I thought that the public should have the entire piece of property, because the landowner was going to withhold one of the actual best security places for the elk. Not only did that change, it changed so the landowner decided he wanted a larger piece of property. So essentially that the value to the public was going to be reduced. And when they asked me, how could you make it better for the public? I said, I think if you were to do it, you would need to have the whole thing, so then that the public would have access to the whole thing. Second thing I said is I think you have to have something on the weeds to control noxious weeds. And third, I said, I think you're going to have to watch that we don't pay too much value for this. I think it should be commensurate with what really is the appraised value for the land in Broadwater County. And that's where deep pockets really make a difference. And when your government has the deep pockets, it puts a pressure on every single one, as I've already mentioned, the working farmers and ranchers in this county. And so, I don't know if you would solve it. I think we just have to have, I wanted to have the commissioners aware of it, because it may look really good for the public, but it would not be very good for the farmers and ranchers if the value was way above the appraised value for that property in Broadwater County.
Thanks.
Yes,
I'm
Carol?
Carol Plamo, and I would like to oppose this sale. I oppose the GT.
Yes. Toby?
I'm Toby Dundas, I oppose also. I agree with Kelly and Tim. And another thing, just not the weeds, the fencing and there's just owning the land doesn't put an end to it. There's a lot of maintenance that goes on with owning land. And on another note, I'm also, nobody likes to elk hunt more than I do and be out in the mountains, but you turn 100 pickups loose and 300 hunters, there, 2 days there won't be any elk there anyway. And they were gonna oppose line hunting on it also for winter range security. And there's less than 10% of the elk winter there anyway. Especially if you don't allow line hunt. I could kill a lion there just about every day of the week. So I agree with what's already been said. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby.
I'm Chuck Hahn, and I'll speak on two levels. I'm a local rancher, and I have to agree with what Kelly and Toby have already said about land values and the things that go with the acquisition of private lands by federal agencies. It's become the mentality of they want to get a hold of that property because somebody else is gonna buy it. It's private property, as Kelly said. Anybody can sell their lands and for whatever price they choose to. The agencies do have very deep pockets. And when they acquire that land, they don't always look at the infrastructure that's necessary to be financed afterwards. And you see that with the agencies that You see it with Iron Mass property. It was bought through the conservation fund, which is the same one that was coming for this. And it went, I don't remember for sure how many years it's been since it was acquired. It has never had another livestock grazed on it. It was difficult to get weeds controlled. We fought long and hard as private individuals against the BLM, who was the final owner of the Iron Mass property, to treat private property as it was before when it was private property. That they take care of their share of the fences, they do the same thing that a private landowner would do to another private landowner. With that said, I'm also co-chair of the CAB, which is the Citizens Board for the Montana Fish and Wildlife Conservation Trust. The trust that was formed when the cabin sites were sold at the north end of the lake, and we, by law, were funded to have an escrow fund of, started out as $14 million, it's now up to around $25 million. And that fund is used to acquire properties that are accessible by the public for fish, wildlife, habitat, that sort of thing. And I sit as a citizen or the landowner advocate on that board. And through time, I have advocated that when they buy a property, they have to buy it at fair market value. But they're always able to come up with some comp somewhere or an appraisal that shows that the price they're paying is fair market value. And in that case, they do continue to raise the price of land and make it more difficult for agriculture to compete. And these rural counties, agriculture is still the major base. Subdivision does not pay its way. Subdivision there should be a process in place for subdivisions where the costs that are going to happen are paid up front. So once land is subdivided, the taxation should be a different. It still gets taxed as agricultural ground, but those are things that state law, whatever law it is that controls it, is what's in place now. But those are just things that I see as a rancher, an individual, a citizen of the county, and also as a board member that has sat on that trust board for 20 years and has advocated for some of these things happening and that need to happen if agencies are continuing to acquire this land. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Darrell Baum, and I ranch in the Winston area, and I pretty much agree with all these gentlemen have said. I ranch in the Elkhorns up there, and I guess I feel that the private property isn't protected enough, mostly because of the Wildlife Management Unit. The weeds is the biggest problem up there. There's no timber management to go along with it. And I guess I don't believe you can manage wildlife without managing other resources on the ground. And anyway, the land values too is one thing that I oppose on this acquisition. Would have to go through with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Joe?
I'm Josie Reynolds. I'm here on behalf of the Thompson Ranch and also the Broadwater Conservation District. And I emailed you guys a letter and showing the Conservation District's comments towards being opposed to the sale of the GT Ranch. Were you all able to see that letter?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess if you have any questions, I have 2 board members here as well, so, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I got a question, if I can, please. So we got a great cross-section of our farm and ranch community here. And so this issue may come before the commission again. So my question is, how do we balance the rights of the property owner against, what's gonna happen? And I wanna change the scenario just a little bit. So say it's not a government agency that's buying this piece of property. Say it's another individual that has deep pockets. And he's buying it as a recreational piece of property for himself. I can see the same scenario unfolding. What would you see our role as a commission in stepping in between those two individuals and their property rights to either buy or sell land? I guess I'm asking for your input. How will we do that?
I think, Commissioner, the issue is a little bit different. And then the reason it's different is because, one, you have a private-to-private sale.
Okay.
Another, you have a private-to-government sale.
Okay, and I guess that was kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
So really, the major heartburn is the government's involvement, not so much if it was a private landowner selling.
I think,
Is
in
that-
my
is that-
case,
is
I
that fair?
would say that is the case.
Okay,
And I will also offer that the landowner who is next to the GT, who is Tom O'Donnell, opposed this very same transaction. The second thing that is the difference between the two is because when you have a private landowner next to you, you still have the ability on weeds to go to the weed board and force them to take care of the weeds if possible. You don't have that ability to do that with these government agencies. Basically, they are able to not take care and steward the land. So yes, I know that's going to come up. We all know that's going to come up. But I think that's the issue for you as commissioners is, it's difference between private and private, private and government. And we still have some safeguards if that private landowner who, yes, all of us feel that they should be stewarding the land and often do not, we at least have some resource to go and say, yes, you have to take care of the land.
right. And I understand that. So in regards to changing the land values, it probably isn't gonna make a difference, right, whether it was a government agency that paid the inflated price or some other private individual. Is that right? We still can't dodge that bullet.
Correct.
Yes, Ken?
Just a follow-up on your question, Commissioner, one of the things that is also really important to remember is if this goes from the private property ownership to government ownership, Broadwater County loses a big chunk of taxable value.
I actually think that.
And so that's the other side of
There
that.
was a provision there that the state would still, it would be similar to like a PILT payment that we get from the, they would still make that payment. I mean, and that was kind of the whole idea, I was hoping that Gary would show up, was an informational thing for everybody, so that we kind of knew really what was gonna happen, but that's not gonna happen, so it may in the future. And like I say, I have no idea what's gonna happen, if it's gonna be another private landowner or another government agency that wants to take a look at this, I don't know. But your input helps us when that time comes, so.
One follow-up to that is, traditionally, even if another private landowner bought it, what has happened with farms and ranches, it's not just the taxes on the land, it's the taxes on the equipment. And so that's where you lose out in another income source that would be coming to Broadwater County. Now, it's true, that private person that bought it may not have tractors on there or equipment, but in most cases, they would. And so we would be losing, again, some values from business equipment tax.
And then livestock.
And livestock, yeah, you're right.
Chuck?
The one thing I'd like to convey to the commissioners is that when these acquisitions come up where it is private to government, that you guys carry a lot of weight in whether you back it or not. If you have a project come before you and you decide you want to back it, let's say it's going to either the BLM eventually, and you may not always see that when it comes to you. It'll be one of the funds that comes to you, Rocky Mountain Health Foundation, Conservation Fund, whoever. But ask ultimately who that agency is going to be that's going to be the final owner. Because you take the BLM or you take the Forest Service, who were both created under government acts, the BLM under the Taylor Grazing Act and the Forest Service under the Forest Service Act. And it gives them the ability to say to the private individual next to them, you keep up all the fences, your cattle get on us, you're gonna be trespassed. They have a lot of leverage. If they're gonna end up with those lands through an acquisition that is funded through grants or whatever, use some leverage and say, okay, treat that land as it was when it was private lands. Keep your share of the fences up, take care of your weeds. Don't fall back on this, that, while it's going into government ownership, that it should fall under the same process that it did when it was formed as a Forest Service or as the BLM. These are different lands, this is a different situation. So use your leverage that way to, you may not change anything, but at least use your leverage and say, okay, is there a way that you guys are going to manage this land? Take care of the things that need through infrastructure. If you've got a plan in place that you have the infrastructure already guaranteed that you have money to fund it. Because they'll say, oh, we can't do it more than 1 year at a time. We can't guarantee you a year more than a year at a time. So if they can't do that, why should they have that land?
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to thank the commissioners for giving us an opportunity to at least express a viewpoint from the ag community. We thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You bet.
Thanks for coming, you guys.
Thank you.